Okay, so I'm going to start out with a personal anecdote, which actually, it's kind of disturbing, but it's why I'm a feminist, and then I go off to talk about science as narrate. But I'm sorry if I don't make too much eye contact, it's because I'm reading on this page. Okay. So the first time a man tried to follow me home was when I was 14. I did not scream as I saw the man on the train try to look up my skirt, and I did not flinch when we made eye contact and he laughed at how scared I was. When I got off the train just before the doors closed, he whipped his head around and licked his lips as he stared at me. This, at the time, I did not know, would be the beginning of many accounts of sexual assault. When I tell this story, people often dismiss him as crazy, along with all of the other men who have also followed him home. But what they fail to realize is that these isolated events are part of a greater story. Ask any girl in this room, and she has had a similar experience. It is not a symptom of craziness. It is a part of a culture that tells men that this is okay, that this is acceptable behavior, and that she was asking for it. And when I say that society tells men that this is okay, I don't mean that literally. Most people would probably be disgusted by what happened to me, but those same people would probably ask me what I was wearing or why I was out that late, even though it was only 5 p.m. And when I say that society tells men that this is okay, I mean that society sees rapists as inevitable, and therefore it becomes my responsibility to prevent sexual assault. It's that same boys will be boys mentality. Well, maybe if we stopped teaching boys that being mischievous is in their nature, this wouldn't happen. We paint boys and men as being entirely driven by sexual relations, as not knowing any better, and as not being able to control themselves when they see a short skirt, which stems entirely from the fact that they are told it is natural and acceptable for them to do that. We victim blame because we see sexual assault as inevitable. For proof of this, look at sex education in schools. Everyone here probably took health, so you know that New York City's sex education system is pretty comprehensive. However, the prevalence of religion in the United States has lobbied for abstinence-only education in most of the rest of the nation, where children are taught that condoms cause cancer, that a girl is like a licked lollipop after she loses her virginity, and that women are supposed to be the gatekeepers of sexual purity, and if they're not, they're humiliated. Take the recent celebrity nude leak, for example. A man literally released nude photos of female celebrities to ridicule and debase them for having a sexual drive. Women's sexual drives are seen as something to be hidden, private, and, in some extreme cases, existing only to please the man. This is true of the United States, but probably even more true in the rest of the world, where gender issues and sexual norms are rampantly misogynistic and homophobic. In many Middle Eastern countries, for example, women effectively live as prisoners, unable to leave the house except under the guardianship of a male guardian. In Russia, you are not allowed to be openly gay. This situation is even worse for women of color who experience a type of harassment fundamentally different from white women because of the intersections of oppression that exist there. For example, Laverne Cox, who I'm sure probably most of you know, she's a lead in the show Orange is the New Black. She's a trans woman of color, and she describes that the street harassment that she experiences starts because she's a woman, and then when the realization is that she is trans, it becomes something fundamentally something else. And so many trans women have to experience this. Just last month, a woman named Alana Nettles was catcalled and then beat to death when it was realized that she was a transgender woman. In 2001, a woman named Amanda Milan, something similar happened to her in the Times Square area, and she was stabbed to death. And Laverne Cox quotes as saying, "Our lives are often in danger simply for being who we are when we are trans women. And there are many intersecting identities and oppressions that make that happen." So to add on to what Mary said, I can really relate to her experience in science. And what's the name of the?
Oh, STEP. The OCC STEP.
Okay, so I can really relate to that experience. Because, for example, I'm taking AP Physics this year. So despite being in the SSR major, I decided to take AP Physics 1. And I noticed that the participation is literally exclusively boy participation. And it is, and my friend Rachel's nodding her head because it's so true. Literally, the girls do not participate or are not likely to ask a question because they feel ostracized. They feel like if they ask a stupid question that they're living up to the stereotypes that they've internalized, right? That girls aren't good at science, girls aren't good at math. And I can really feel the same way. Even though math and science are my favorite subjects, and I am good at them, I cannot get myself to raise my hand. For example, I often have to stay behind class because I'm so embarrassed to speak in front of the rest of the class. And this is not something that is prevalent just in my class. I think that Rachel just nodded her head. It goes to show that girls just naturally aren't inclined to participate because they don't want to live up to the kind of secret, inherent stereotypes that are implied in science and math classes. For example, the segregation in tech majors are very rampant. I think that the SSR major has about 7 boys this year, while the software major has 4 girls, right? So it surprises me that tech is so bad at acknowledging things like this or trying to make a space where we can talk about the segregation, because I think that girls go into tech naturally thinking engineering may just not be for them, or that they're inherently bad at math and science. And so I think that there is no discourse about in tech about this type of sexism that does happen, that prevents girls from doing tech and engineering majors and inclines them to do something like SSR and LAS, which isn't bad. It's just that they're naturally more inclined to not look at an engineering major as a possibility. So also, I took DDP last year. I'm actually a transfer into tech. I transferred from Midwood. So I was forced to take DDP as a sophomore. And it was such an awful class. But I think that a lot of the experiences that I have are very indicative of what I have to experience as a girl. For example, I was naturally very bad. Not naturally, I mean like personally I don't like modeling or like the 3D printing at all. So naturally I was just not good at the class. And I remember at some point, I would go to tutoring, I would bother my teacher all the time. I would go to tutoring anytime I possibly could. And at one point, I told her I wanted to be an engineer. And she said that engineering is probably not for me. And I don't think that she necessarily said it because I'm a girl, because she's a teacher. I don't think she said it because I'm a girl. I'm not calling this teacher sexist. I'm just saying that enough was enough to turn me off from engineering permanently. I remember after that, I just thought that I needed to pass DDP and that would be it, that I wouldn't have to deal with engineering anymore. And I gave up on it right away, and I think that's very indicative of what I have to endure as a girl, because programs like Girls Who Code make engineering fun and appealing. And there should be more of that, because girls need that extra reassurance, they need that push to go to technology majors. And a lot of people think that the fact that there aren't a lot of women in technology as something agential. Like a lot of the time when I'm having like angry Facebook fights about whether or not there is sexism in tech fields, I run into a lot of boys who naturally think that, oh, it's agential. Women just choose not to do science and math because they don't want to. But what they don't realize is that women are, they are naturally, institutionally excluded. Like systematically they're excluded from these fields. For example, recently, a sexual harassment lawsuit was filed against the CEO of Tinder for not only trying to pursue his female coworker, but by discrediting her when she turned down his sexual advances. So why would a girl like me ever dream of going into technology when things like that happen, and when there's a programmer culture so distinct that actually like inventions and apps are made? For example, recently an app called Titstare was made that is it's supposed to like document you as you look at women's boobs, and like you upload it and it's supposed to be really funny. So why am I, as a girl, expected to pursue engineering when things like that happen on a regular basis? And why am I, like, it should not be like that. And I think that a lot of the time when I tell people, you know, I like to code, or I want to be an engineer, I get like a lot of snide remarks and laughter, and I think that's very, again, very, I know I keep repeating myself, but that's very indicative of why there aren't women in engineering. There aren't women in engineering not because they're not inclined to do those fields, not because they don't want to, but because things like that happen all the time. And it's people that don't inform themselves that make sure to perpetuate this. Like all the time, like recently in my physics class, someone actually said there shouldn't be affirmative action for girls in technology because it's their own choice not to do those things. And I recently got into a Facebook fight. On my status on Facebook was, dear boys who get offended that feminist movements don't focus on them. There was a little something that was all about you for like a million years, and it's called history. And I'm sorry if you got offended by that, because I don't mean to be offensive, but it's just naturally, the discourse, like the discourse in like a lot of conversations and a lot of classrooms is automatically white heteronormativity. I think that is what the natural inclination is to talk. Like, it's not a space for women, it's not a space for people of color. It's naturally on default a space for white men. So I think that I've actually been receiving a lot of criticism for young women's leadership because we talk too much about women's issues, but I think that it's important to stress that there isn't a place, for a lot of the time there isn't a place where women can feel comfortable to talk about how they're excluded systematically or how they don't feel comfortable. And to say that it's unfair for men or you're being sexist, it's just perpetuating this type of like default setting where if we go outside of that setting that you're automatically being sexist towards boys. And I'm not saying like boys can't talk about their issues. I'm just saying that the main focus of feminism has always been to get women's voices in there and to get other people in support of feminism, which is like so important. And it's something that's constantly undermined. And girls now naturally not being inclined to pick STEM, it's not something that some of us consciously realize, but we're systematically excluded from those majors. And despite the fact that there are affirmative action policies in place, it does not level the playing field. Like the playing field is like men and like women, and then affirmative action kind of does this thing where it like wobbles it a little. But still that doesn't make up for the fact that many STEM fields have a lot of institutionalized sexism, and no matter what you do, there will always be access, privileged access for boys. Like they have natural privilege that they shouldn't have. Like for example, I was talking to a boy the other day, like on our rare occurrence that I do talk to boys. I was talking to a boy and he was like, well, actually, a lot of my friends that are boys that apply to tech opportunities are often denied, and that's unfair because they should not do that because it's like for like a diversity quota, which like doesn't make any sense because you should just hire like very like qualified people. And I think my answer to that is, for women and people of color, being rejected to coding opportunities or to engineering opportunities is something that naturally happens. It's something that we have to experience. And for men to not have to experience, that's a privilege. So for them not to have to experience, you know, what it's like to be denied a job because you're a girl and because men are seen as naturally more competent, you don't have to experience that. And as a man, you live with the safety that if you have the qualifications that you should get that job. So for you to be like, oh, it's unfair, I was denied of a job that I have the qualifications for, doesn't matter, because you're being denied of a privilege that you should have never had in the first place. I'm sorry if I sound angry, because I don't care if I sound angry. First of all, the fact that you're offended, you shouldn't look at like you should. If you're offended by what I'm saying, you shouldn't be like, oh, I should take this anger out on women. You should take this anger out on the patriarchy, because it's the patriarchy that is at fault for this. And I know that sounds like a conspiracy theory, which I've actually gotten before, but I think that the gender issues that do exist today are some form of men are supposed to be strong and never cry and be good at math and science, and women are weak and domiciled. So we have a lot of work to do, but I think that a lot of the issues can be resolved with movements like feminism. And I think that it's really important to have a space for women where they can talk about their suffering and they can feel comfortable expressing more. So that was a long speech, I'm sorry.